In computer science, we use functions to organize our code. You break your code into chunks and you program one chunk at a time. The format, you put DEF and then whatever name you want for your function, followed by a bracket, any variables you need to execute the code you want to execute, and then you return any variables that have been changed that the main line needs to know about. Let's take an example. This function is called title. Did we send it any variables? Were there any variables that it needed to work? So in here are all the variables we send it, and it looks like we didn't need any. And why didn't we need any? Because our code was quite straightforward. It just tells you it's a title page for a game and it tells you how it works. You'll notice we're not returning anything because we didn't do anything with any variables. So this is a very basic function. They're going to get more complicated. In your main line, how do you actually call the function? You do it by just specifying the function name and any variables. So title, when you execute that in the main line, what will happen is it'll say, welcome to the Magic World Adventure, and it gives you the instructions. Here's another example for us. We could have a function called cats. All it does is draw some cats. Every time you use this in your main line, this image will appear on the screen. So if you were telling a story or a choose your adventure, and you don't want to keep drawing this out in your code every time, it's simpler if we just put it like this. So let's write a program. We're going to write a program. It's going to ask the user for two numbers and then determine the sum on the product. So let's write that in English first. Get two numbers, add them to find the sum, print the answer, multiply them to find the product, and then print the product. Let's try writing the code. Get two numbers. We know how to do that. That's an input statement. So we're going to ask the user for two numbers. Input, type the number, put it in num1, type a second number, put it in num2. You've seen that before. Add the numbers. Now we are going to do that with a function. So we said to use a function, you have to put a function name and send it any variables. So these two variables from down here, we have two of them. We're going to send them to the function and we're going to add them together. Now, this is a little bit tricky to get used to. In the function, we give them different variable names. Why we do that? If you have a bunch of people working together, someone is generally writing the function while someone else is writing the main line. And so to not get confused and have to communicate too much, we'll say you use numbers here and we'll use A and B up here. So we're going to take two numbers, add them together, put them in answer, and the main line wants to know what the answer is, so we return it. So one more time, DEF defines a function. This function is called add. It's expecting two numbers. When it gets the two numbers, it'll add them and put them in a variable called answer, which then gets returned to the main line. Print the sum, we know how to do that, but first we have to call the function. So how do we call the function? The function is called add. We're sending num1 and num2 to the function and putting the answer in sum. And then we just print the answer. And we can start getting fancy with our prints. We could say the sum of num1 and num2 is sum. So let's just go over how that works. Imagine you type in a number and it's the number 5. You type in a second one and that's the number 3. We send to the add function the number 5 and the number 3. 5 goes up here for A. 3 would go in for B. So we take 5 plus 3. Answer would then equal 8. We return that answer of 8 in the main line. So it's the answer that gets returned over here. So when we print the sum of 5 and 3, we get an answer of 8. Okay, if you understood that, do you think you could write a function to multiply the numbers? You would need a DEF. Your function would need a good name. We'd probably have a couple of variables, and what would change in here? Here's our function name. I called mine multiply. I took my numbers A and B, multiplied them this time, and returned the answer. And you will see it's fairly common that in your functions, you often tend to recycle your variables. So the person writing the functions might just always use A and B and C and D, and the main line will use different variables. Do you think you could write the code to print it? First, we have to call the function. Our function is called multiply. It's sending num1 and num2 to the function and putting the answer in product. And then we print it. So let's see what happens. We said num1 was 5, num2 was 3. And I'm just making those numbers up if you're wondering where they're coming from. So A is 5 and B is 3. We'd multiply 5 by 3 and getting an answer of 15. We return the answer of 15 and it gets returned on the other side of the function. So the 15 goes in for product and we would print the product of 5 and 3 is 15. Your job, 6A. 6A, I ask you to write a program using functions that will ask the user for two numbers. Determine the sum, the product, the difference, and the quotient. So what do you have to do? I would start by putting all this code in a program. And then I'd write two more functions. I'd write one function to subtract and one function to multiply. And then I'd see what I did down here to add and multiply, and can we figure out what to do to divide and subtract. Now, you'll notice I'm adding a little bit more information up here. These things. These are our comments. The computer does not care, but I like them because they help me organize things and let me know where I am. So I've just ended the add function, and that lets me know that this is a different function. Give yourself another comment. I'm ending the multiply function. And why do we put all the functions at the top? It's nice to know what functions are included in a program. So it's a good idea to put them all at the top where you can see them. All right, after you've done 6A, 6B is a little bit of chemistry. In 6B, I want you to use one function and one function only. So yes, we have broken up down lots of simple steps in 6A, and we have 4 functions. But when you do 6B, can you do all the math in one? So the idea behind a function is it allows you to chunk pieces of code and write the chunks one at a time. It also keeps your main line nice and pretty. So the code down here is much easier to read, looks more like English, and might not hold all the specifics. 6B will give you a better feel for that. In 6B, you're simply going to use one function and put all the code in here to do the work, and that'll keep the main line nice and clean. All right, have fun.